So we are going to work together tonight called Digging into the Whole Brainchild. So The Whole Brainchild is a book by Tina Payne Bryson and Dr. Dan Siegel. I'm a huge fan of both of them, and they have heavily influenced my own parenting and my interactions with children in general. So we are going to dig into that tonight, and my hope is we'll dig into it again in a future session as well. And so we're going to jump in. I'm going to review 2 tools that were shared in November. I'm going to go over those again. I'm going to give you 2 new tools and also teach you about the brain while we're doing all of that. So I'm going to start with parenting is hard work. Does anyone in this room agree with that? Raise your hand. I had to get the manual out recently to figure out how to put the filter in my refrigerator. But I came home from the hospital 18 years ago with a baby, and there was no manual for that. I started reading books, and books can only go so far. And then you just have to live on experiences. And so tonight I want you to hear this information with, you have all these experiences. Your children will give you plenty of opportunities to practice what we are going to talk about. They also are just asking for one thing from you. No matter how rough it is, really what we need developmentally, all of us need this, is connection. I need you as the adult in my life to be present, to be in this moment with me so that I don't feel alone when the world around me is chaotic and crazy. And so that's what we're going to work on tonight. If you were to purchase this book, you could also purchase the workbook, which is meant for you, the adult, so that you can practice all this. But they highlight 3 things, and I want to lift those up because I feel like this is what's going to guide us. 1 is use everyday moments to exercise your kiddo's brain. We have this amazing opportunity to develop or nurture a child's brain from really birth to the age of 25, because we believe that the brain does not fully develop until age 25 to 27. So those of you that have older kids, there is still hope, and you can still use some of this. So use the everyday moments to practice these strategies. So 1, I want you guys to think about this. Exercising the brain. That is really what our goal is. What we don't use, we lose. Our brain is amazing. It does all these great things that start with all these words and letters that we all don't understand, but things like pruning and priming and now I just lost the other one, but that's okay. All of this stuff's happening all the time. It's molding, it's changing. You have an opportunity every day, if you just are present, to mold and shape. The other thing that you have an opportunity to do as a parent is integration. So integration works 2 ways, and we're going to get into this. Integration works upstairs and downstairs. So we call that the vertical integration. The other way we can integrate a kiddo's brain is horizontally, which is the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. We all have 2 sides to our brain, so just know that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, about how do I help my kiddo integrate both horizontally and vertically. The last piece I already said, just be present. If we can do those 3 things in everyday moments, then we are helping to nurture our child's developing mind. And here's the goal for all of that, because I feel like if I ask this, if I say, raise your hand, you're going to raise your hand. How many of you want to have kids that are successful in school? How many of you want to have kids that can build strong, lasting relationships with other people in their lives? How many of you want your kiddo to be able to handle their emotions and manage their body? Yes. And the last one, how many of you would like your kiddos to be able to make sound decisions? Yes, we all want those things. So, give me a show of hands. How many parents, raise your hand every time I hit your area. How many parents in this room have kids preschool age? Toddlers and preschool age. Okay, how many have lower elementary, so like kindergarten to 2nd grade? Okay, and how many have 3rd to 5th graders? Okay, and I know some of you probably have some older than that. Yes? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, let's get going. So, let's start with everybody get your hands out, wave at me, make sure you can see your wrist. So we're going to start with the hand model of the brain. So Dr. Dan Siegel developed this years ago as a way to help parents understand the developing brain. And he used brain science to kind of tone this down so that we could understand what's happening inside of our heads. So we're going to use your hand. I like the hand model because it goes everywhere with me. And when I'm with people, I sometimes will look at my hand because I'm like, where are they at right now? So that I know how to proceed. So we're going to start with your forearm, your wrist area right here. That would be your spinal cord into your brainstem. So on your body, your spinal cord coming up into your brainstem, which is here into your neck and coming into the base of your skull. So that brainstem piece and into the flat part of your hand is the part of the downstairs brain, and all of that is running your fight, flight, or freeze responses. So your fight, flight, or freeze can get triggered whenever you feel threatened. So physical safety, emotional safety, and psychological safety. Those are the things that can trigger your fight, flight, or freeze. This is totally unconscious and reacts to protect us. Our brain is designed to always be in protection mode. It's not about how happy we are. Our brain could care less about how happy we are. Our brain is focused on, how do I keep this person safe? So fold your finger over. You're going to get the limbic regions, which this would be your hippocampus and your amygdala. This region is responsible for your emotions. It is responsible for eating, sleeping, your motivation, your attention, your focus. All of that lives in this limbic region. This is all known as the downstairs brain. It reacts, it reacts, it reacts. There is no thinking involved when this part gets activated. So let's pretend your kid is throwing a temper tantrum. Guess where your kid is? The downstairs brain. That is where your kiddo is. So when you start saying, remember the rules, we're not supposed to behave like this, they could care less what you are saying. They're not even hearing what you're saying. You're talking to the upstairs brain, but the upstairs brain has flipped, and only the downstairs brain is present. I share this with you because this is what most of us do. We start talking when our kiddos are not ready to hear the talk. What they need is for us to be present and help calm this part of the downstairs brain, that reactivity, so that we can get to the place to have the thinking brain available so we can talk. This is considered the cortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. That's what we focus on in the upstairs brain. The prefrontal cortex, if you were looking in your brain, it's right here behind your forehead. These are the kind of skills that are available in that prefrontal cortex, what we call the executive function skills. I'm going to list these off, and you're going to be like, yeah. So time management, prioritizing, organizing, goal achievement, task initiation, impulse control, empathy, working memory. All of those things are part of your executive function skills. They live up here in the upstairs brain. So when my lid is flipped, I am not able to access those skills. See, they're flipped. Can't access them. But what do? We start talking to our kids about those very things. So when I have not had, my body's been out of control, you start talking to me about controlling my body, well, guess what? My lid's not down, so I can even hear that. I'm in my downstairs brain. So our job as parents is to try and stay in our upstairs brain so we can coach a kiddo to move from the downstairs brain back to their upstairs. Here's what happens. They're doing their thing. They're saying their stuff. And what happens to us? We flip. Our lid is flipped, their lid is flipped, and now what's happening? What's happening? Worlds are colliding, craziness. Sometimes there's yelling. Sometimes there might be people leaving the room. Things happen when we both flip our lids. So, as we talk through these strategies tonight, these tools, I'm going to talk to you about how you keep your lid down And also, how do you help your kiddo integrate the downstairs brain with the upstairs brain so that they can access their beauty and those thinking skills? Oh, I forgot to talk about right and left. Let me do right, left real quick. So right side of the right hemisphere houses the hubs that experience the emotions. Like you feel the emotions there. Also, your nonverbal cues are housed on the right side. The left side of your brain is more logical, linear thinking, as well as labeling and assigning meaning. So if I put those two together for you, I'm going to experience my emotions here, but I need there to be these neural connections happening between the right and left side in order for me to be able to name the feelings, to talk about the feelings, which is also why we use this word integration, because we want to make sure that the right and left side of our brain is talking to one another so that we can help our kiddos be able to talk about their feelings. Otherwise, they just experience them and have a hard time talking about them. So let's start with Name It to Tame It. So Name It to Tame It is a tool I have used for years. I still use it all the time now. Research shows us that assigning a name to what we feel will calm down the activity of the emotional circuitry. So they have taken maps of the brain, and people have experienced intense feelings. So typically, intense feelings create more emotional circuitry. So anger, frustration, sadness, madness, irritation. And it lights up your brain if we were looking at your map. And what happens is, when we name it, so I feel angry when someone cuts me off in traffic, I now have decreased some of that intensity just by naming the feeling. The other piece that we do in naming the feeling and connecting it to the situation is we teach kids that feelings just don't arbitrarily happen. Feelings are attached to experiences and situations. Does that make sense? So when I say I feel sad when I don't get invited to a birthday party, I feel happy when I get invited to a birthday party. Every time we attach feelings to the situation, our brain begins to form what we call these associations. And so the next time that I don't get invited to a birthday party, guess what? Sad comes up for me. Why? Because my brain has already mapped that out because it's an experience that I've had before. But if I can name the feeling and the situation and talk about that, the intensity is less. And I begin what I like to call, I get to author my own story. The story doesn't own me. So when we don't talk about our feelings, guess what? They own you. So if we can teach our kids how to talk about feelings, they then have more power the next time they have that same feeling. And I said this earlier, storytelling helps integrate the right and left side of our brain because I'm having the feeling, but I need the words to go along with it to assign the meaning. So have these conversations in the moment. So I always talk about with younger kids, they're going to have their explosion of the feeling. Their behavior is communicating with us. So calm, so some breathing, some calmness, some time, and then be able to say, you seem frustrated. You were upset when your brother took your toy away. You feel sad when you don't get invited to the birthday party. Fill in the blank for them. The younger they are, the more you will need to fill in the blank. Older elementary kids are going to be like, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad. Ask a question. What do you think you're mad about? See if they can connect the dots. If they cannot connect the dots, then help them connect the dots. You seem angry. I heard you talking. So-and-so didn't want to come over and play with you this weekend. Could that be it? So again, we're just trying to give language to the feeling and the situation. Now, I will tell you, kids as little as 3, you can start doing this for them. You felt sad. Your friend took your toy. You felt mad because you couldn't get the candy in the candy aisle. Any of those things. You can start that as young as 3, and as they get older, just keep building and building and building. Younger kids, here's what a younger kid might say too. He made me mad. So frame that for them. You felt mad when he took your toy. Because otherwise, the story they're going to tell is that John made me mad. And that isn't an accurate story. They felt mad when John took their toy. The mad came from the toy being taken. So again, how they narrate their story, how they remember things, is then how they interact with that child the next time or with you the next time. So think about how can you help develop that piece. Name it to tame it. All right, this is actually my favorite one to use with adults, but we're going to talk about it with kids because this works with kids too. I use this a lot with adults, actually. So connect to redirect is the next tool. So often what happens, and you guys can tell me if this ever happens to you. So I could come home from a really rough day, and I could just be venting and just talking about all the cruddy things that happened. And my husband will look at me and be like, so what are we having for dinner? And I'll be like, did you not hear anything I just said? Yeah, but there's nothing I can do about that. What has happened is I have been connected with the right side of my brain. The emotions are flooding me, and I'm spilling the beans. And what do I get? I get the left side of the brain, which is logic, linear thinking, the tasks. I could care less about dinner right now. I just need you to hear me. So how connect to redirect works is we connect first with someone, hear a feeling, validate a feeling, have that attunement, that connection, and then we shift into problem solving, task, that kind of thing. So think about your kiddo. So I have a teenage son now, but we had lots of stuff happen throughout growing up. And so I remember there was a time in like late elementary school when he had gotten a phone call asking him to come and fill in on a basketball team. And it was a school night, and it was like an 8 o'clock game, and his bedtime was like 8:30. And so I had said, no. It was last minute, all that. Well, it's probably like 6 o'clock, so it wasn't completely last minute, but somewhat last minute. I said no. I remember he yelled at me, I hate you. You don't ever let me do anything. I wanted to do this with my friends. They probably won't ask me again. I remember all of that. And then I remember he slammed the door. And I remember I just stood there and I was like, whew, that was a flood of emotions. And then I walked away and I thought, I'm going to give him a chance to calm down. So next thing I know, the door opens and he's going downstairs. He's got his shoes on. He's got his basketball. I'm like, where are you going? He goes, I'm going outside. Leave me alone. So next thing I know, he's shooting baskets. Just the bam, the bam, the bam. So here's what happened. He spent about 10 minutes doing that. And I went down there. I said, what? I said, what's going on here? I said, you seem frustrated. You seem angry about not getting to go play ball with your friends. He goes, I was. He goes, but now I'm feeling better about it. I understand. You're right. I've got a bedtime. I've da-da-da-da-da. Like, you guys, I did no work. His ability for me to give some space to let the flood of emotions happen and then come back down and have the conversation to redirect, because here's how I problem solve that with him. If your friends would like to have you come join their team, if they could call before 4 o'clock or before 5 o'clock, I'm willing to make that happen, but not at 6 or 6:30. So I could use logic after we'd connected about the strong emotions. So think about that in your own life with your own kids or with your significant others. How often do we have that emotional flood and we move to fixing or solving before we allow them to experience that emotion? A lot. So connecting to redirect allows us to sit with the emotions for a minute before we redirect. So you're going to acknowledge feelings in a non-judgmental way. You're going to be present for the other person. That means your tone of voice, your facial expressions. Because remember, the right side of your brain reads nonverbals. So if you're standing there like this, and you're telling me that you're listening and you're being empathetic and you want to hear what I have to say, I'm not going to believe you. My brain's going to look at you and be like, no way. If you're sitting there open and you're listening with eye contact and you're asking me questions about how I feel or about what happened, now I believe you. Now you're tuned in to me. So then I can redirect. I can notice your calmness and start to ask questions to be able to problem solve, to be able to plan, to even set some boundaries, which is ultimately what I did with him. It's not off the table to fill in late for basketball. It's just we need more notice. So connect to redirect. So let's talk about a new tool, move it or lose it. So when you have a kid that is mad, angry, or tantruming, what is your typical response? What's your go-to? Stop. So you're like, just stop it. Just quit. What else? Oh, come on, you guys. You're all here because parenting is hard. Time out. You're frustrated. Your kiddos, you'll say that. You're frustrated. Well, see, you're being healthy right now. Come on. I'm looking for the unhealthy responses.
You won't stop right now.
If you don't stop right now. So that intimidation, that threat. Say again? Just give in because you're tired of the tantrum, especially when you're in public. Because then what's happening? People are looking at you. And you're worried about how you're going to look and what they're thinking. So yes. Go to your room. That is another one. Ignore. Just yell at them. That's right. Here's what happens. Here's what we know again. This is why I like Dan Siegel. Give me the research. Tell me what's going on in my brain. We can change our emotional state with physical movement. So think about some of those things we just threw out. Do they support physical movement? Or do they limit physical movement? If I send you to your room, probably not maybe there's some movement, depends how big your room is. If we do timeout, the whole premise of a timeout is it's a small space. There is no movement. And if they start to get out of it, what are we saying? Get back in there. We limit movement when there's big emotions. And I'm here to tell you, guess what? Brain development research tells us that's the wrong thing to do. Let the body move so that the downstairs brain can regain balance with the upstairs brain. This is hard because this is counterintuitive to what we have known, and it's hard because it's just like, really? You want me to allow space for there to be movement? Let's go back to my basketball example. I had a kid that was flooded with emotions. He went down and shot baskets for 10 minutes. Did he move? Yes. Did it change his state? Yes. When I got down there, he wasn't the whole ticked off kid anymore. He was calmer. He was able to talk to me. That was because of movement. And maybe because we've talked about feelings before, but I'm going to go with the movement. Movement allows us to regain balance in our body. So I'm going to give you another example. I forget I did tried to get smart and do these little fly-ins, but then I forget to click. Let's talk about this. When you feel anxious or worried, where do you feel that at in your body? Everywhere. Let's be a little bit more specific. Chest, stomach, shoulders, head, arms, legs. So think about when you have that feeling, anxious, worried, look at how your body responds to that emotion with movement. Think about that. Your body is giving you information, And so again, if we go back to your brain model, your body is giving you information. It's coming up into your brain. And now it's deciding, is this safe, not safe? Oh, it's safe. But guess what? It's activated emotions. So now I'm reactive. I've had this temper tantrum, or I've stomped my feet or slammed a door or whatever that might be. But even if I'm only anxious or worried, look at all those things you guys described that your body sends you signals about. So one, move it or lose it, is about teaching our kids to notice the information that their body's giving them. So when you get tense in the shoulders, when you have a headache, when your stomach churns and turns, you know that to be what? Worry or anxiety or anxiousness. So why wouldn't we teach our kids that? Why wouldn't we help them learn to read their body? The second piece is that so if I think about this, so if my body's sending me these messages, and I'm coming up here into the brainstem, and then I'm in the limbic system, if I do some physical movement, which we know that regulation and the arousal system lives in this limbic region, it would make sense that doing some movement would allow then for my upstairs brain to integrate with my downstairs brain. I would gain that balance back. So, you might say, see again, I'm slow on the things. I should have just put them all up at once. You might say, so Amy, what kind of physical movement am I supposed to do with my kid? I would tell you just about anything that can keep them safe. So the kid that is stomping up and down, encourage them. Stomp it, keep stomping it, keep doing it, get it out. Maybe your kid will do some wall push-ups. Maybe your kid will do some jumping jacks. Maybe your kid needs to do some deep breathing, but do some movement like yoga poses with it to get some balance back. Even dancing. Think about how much happens when you're dancing. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to have this conversation with your kid when they're not ticked off or upset or tantruming, so that then when you start making these suggestions in the moment, you're like, I'm going to notice your body and help you get your lid back. I don't think I said this earlier, but at age 5, you can start talking about flipping your lid. You can start having this basic conversations with your kiddos. My lid's flipped, your lid's flipped. We need to breathe, we need to calm, or in this case, we need to do some exercise, we need to do some movement, so that you can change how your body is internally, so that your emotions can change as well. So move it or lose it. All right. Here comes the biggest one. This one, for me, again, we start this with our preschool kids. It evolves with our elementary kids, and it grows with our older elementary kids. And if we do this one, we will have teenagers that will talk to us. So those of you that are like, I can't believe what's going to happen. Like, I don't even know that I want to have a teenager. They're going to be teenagers. And so use this to nurture that developing mind so that you can have conversation with them when they get to be that age. So here we go. The more we exercise our memory, the stronger it becomes. So think about, I always like to talk about this because I feel like when I'm with my family, my mom has 6 siblings, and I love it when we get together because somebody will invariably say, do you remember, this is one that happened recently, do you remember when the raccoon got in the garage and knocked the can off and it hit Grandpa in the head? And so someone starts telling this elaborate story, and 3 of them are like, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. And then like the middle 2 are like, yeah, it did. Don't you remember? It like knocked him in the noggin. He had a cut, had to go get stitches. And then the bottom 2 are like, yeah, I kind of remember that. I just remember he wore a Band-Aid over his eye. So like there's variations to this story. It is one memory, but there are 6 different ways it's remembered. The 3 that don't remember any of it, the 2 that vividly remember it and can recount it in detail, and the one who's like, yeah, I kind of remember the bandage on his head. This is what happens for all of us. An experience happens in front of us. Our memory codes it, takes it in, and stores it away for us. Remember that limbic region? The whole job of the hippocampus is like the search engine. It's like Google. You just type it in. So it will type in raccoon in garage. And then it pulls up all these images, these emotions, and these thoughts. But I've just illustrated for you the first 3 have no recall. Like there's nothing in their search engine. The middle 2 have all of this flooding them. And the bottom one's like, yeah, I kind of remember it. So part of this memory recall and memory storage happens differently for each of us because of our ages. So depending on the age, depends on how I see it. The other thing is it depends on how many times have I talked about it, depends on how it's getting coded in my head and replayed over and over. So these guys don't remember it and haven't talked about it. These 2 obviously have talked about it because they have it in great detail. This one, again, probably heard these 2 talking about it, and that's the memory, that's the association. Didn't see it, probably didn't even see the Band-Aid. They just know about the Band-Aid because they talked about the Band-Aid. Do you see what I'm saying here? There's different versions. You all have this if you get together with family members or friends. We remember things in different ways. Part of that is because the experience, the situation happens, it comes into your brain processes it, stores it, and then recalls it when something similar happens. And then you use that filter of the last time, the time before, the time before, the time before. It influences how you see the current situation. And sometimes our memory plays tricks on us in order to protect us. So the things that might have intense emotions, things around anger or grief, we don't always talk about. So how that gets coded and stored away is different than how the happy experiences, the fun, loving experiences get coded. Here is a piece that is important for us to know is that, I said this earlier, our brain is constantly changing. We have these opportunities to wire and rewire it. So that's why remember to remember becomes important, is if we practice storytelling with our kids, if we practice recalling events or moments of our day, their brain begins to process it and store it, and we can give additional information if we need to for younger kids. We can also check out feelings with our middle-aged kids, but all of that will help our teenagers be able to recognize and talk about feelings as they grow older. So, Nathan, get ready to cue the video. I want you guys to watch this video. It's just 2 minutes, but it talks about our neurons. So neurons that fire together stay together. So there are pathways in our brain, both in the right and left hemisphere, but also across the right and left hemisphere. And those pathways fire with neurons. And so when we have experiences, the cluster of neurons will fire and code it. That memory gets coded. And so then those get stored away. And if we use them again, they get stronger. And if we use them again, they get stronger. If we don't use them, it gets pruned. It goes, the pathways begin to break apart because they're not used. So I'm going to give you a quick example before we play this. So if you have a 6-year-old and you go to dance class and that first night is just great, participated, waited her turn, just a glorious night at dance. So when you leave, you're like, hey, honey, here's a piece of gum. So while your child was in dance, all these neurons are firing and the memories are getting coded and they're getting stronger and stronger because it's this great experience. And then I get out the door and you're giving me this piece of gum. So guess what? Your neurons are firing again. Oh, this is a new map that's getting formed. I go to dance. I get a piece of gum. So a week later, you go back to dance. Dance is great. You're walking out the door, no intention of giving gum. But what happens? Out comes the hand. I'm going to get gum, right? So you give gum. So now we have this weekly experience of neurons are getting activated. These maps are happening. This is a glorious time to come to dance. And oh, it's even great after dance because I get gum. And now I think they go together. And I may not even ask you for gum any other time because I think gum just goes with dance. Or I may find that I really like gum. Is there other times that I can get gum because now I have this cluster of a memory about gum, and gum's great, gum's good. This is what happens for us. Experiences create these opportunities for us to build memories that make sense or don't make sense. And so when we remember to remember, we can help make sense of them. So I want you guys to watch this 2-minute video about the neurons and what's happening in your brain.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, so experiences wire your child's brain. Experiences wire your brain, and it can be ever-changing. So we always have a chance to work at rewiring the brain. So, ask questions that lead to recollection. Do not ask this question, because this is what we will do. How was your day? And what do you hear? Fine, okay, or nothing. So dig a little deeper. So if you've got a younger kiddo, tell me what you did outside today. Tell me what you played on. Do you hear the difference? If I say, tell me what you did outside today, nothing. If I say, tell me what you played on, there's an answer. They played on something, or they walked around. The same thing can be true of your kiddos that are in lower elementary. Hey, who did you sit with at lunch today? Begin to ask some questions that allow them to give some details. When we do that, again, we're working on building their memory. We're working on them sharing details and making those memory associations. For older kiddos, share experiences of the day and ask questions about social interactions or problems they may be having. Dig a little deeper. I encourage you to make this part of your daily routine. So maybe this happens at dinner. Maybe this happens in the car on the drive home from school to home. Maybe this happens as part of the bedtime routine, something that you do every night after they've brushed their teeth before you read a story. Whatever that might look like. This goes back to being present. We can nurture our child's developing brain when we're present. So creating the space to help recall memories is important. The other piece that happens when we can exercise our memory, so telling stories about what we remember about our day, the other piece that happens is there's integration from right to left. But again, there's integration from the downstairs brain to the upstairs brain because we're connecting any feelings or experiences we've had with maybe some problem-solving skills. Because if I'm having problems with somebody at recess, this could be your chance to ask some questions or offer some suggestions. Ask, how can I be of help? When we hear these stories, we can also check out whether our kiddos are reacting rationally or irrationally. Because sometimes for kids, a small problem looks like a big old whale when it's really just a small minnow. So it allows us to hear what's happening and give them some support in determining where they are with those situations. So somebody might say to me, what if they won't talk to you? This happens. So with younger kids, play a game with them. So tell me 2 things that happened to you today and 1 thing that didn't, and I'm going to see if I can guess which one that is. Get creative with them. Another thing you could do if you're doing this at dinner is you could share a peach and a pit. You guys ever heard about peaches and pits? So the peaches is a good thing that happened today, and a pit is a not so good thing. Some people call it the rose and the thorn. A good thing and a bad thing. Like what happened today that created a happy feeling, what created a different feeling. Ask some questions like that to create those conversations. Be willing to go first and share about your own day so that way they will jump on board with you. When we are able to have these conversations to recall the details of their day, we will help their memories form and have secure associations. And the end game of that, too, is that they learn that when I talk to caring adults, it can be helpful. And that's what gives you value when they become teenagers. Because you've been present at a young age, you can be present when they're growing older. Correct, yes. That's right. So, I invite you, again, if you're interested more in some of the being able to have tools that help nurture and develop your child's brain, The Whole Brain Child is a great book. I will also tell you that Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson have a ton of YouTube videos out there. So again, pull one of those up, just search their names, pull that up, listen to some of those. Again, a lot of YouTube videos, there's some podcasts as well where they do interviews with people, and you can hear them talk about the hand model of the brain, you can hear them talk about different pieces around parenting. And I, again, feel like when we can work with our child's brain and not against our child's brain, parenting is not as hard because we have some tools to help that child's brain develop. And over time, if we're working in that way, it gets easier.